In today's video, we'll be discussing how Kang could very well be the greatest threat the MCU has ever faced. Before we get started, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this. To better understand Kang the Conqueror and why he's such a massive threat to the MCU, I think it's important that we explore who Kang is. Now, the first variant of Kang that we're introduced to in the MCU is a version known as simply He Who Remains. He Who Remains was a scientist from the 31st century who, upon discovering the multiverse, began communicating with other versions of himself, with whom he would share technology and knowledge. But eventually they would encounter versions of themselves who weren't so benevolent, versions of Kang who sought to conquer the multiverse rather than help it, ultimately plunging the multiverse into a massive war, one that would go on to risk all of reality itself. Now, to end this war, He Who Remains would take a creature known as Goliath that can consume time and space itself and weaponize it, using it to end the war by wiping out the other versions of himself. After ending the war, He Who Remains would isolate the multiverse into one single timeline, one that would become known as the Sacred Timeline. To monitor this timeline, he would create an organization known as the Time Variance Authority, whose job it was to monitor the sacred timeline and prevent any new timelines from branching out, risking the creation of more Kangs who could therefore start another multiversal war. I think it's important that we explore the fact that He Who Remains was so fearful of these other Kangs and so fearful of a new war starting that he went to such great lengths to prevent them from existing, condensing the entire multiverse down to one single universe, and then making it his job to monitor that timeline and prevent any new ones from branching off from it and risking the creation of more Kangs. I think that by itself really makes a point of how dangerous Kang is, but as we'll discuss further in this video, they really are that dangerous, and to me potentially pose one of the greatest threats the MCU has ever faced. So why should we fear Kang? Well, during the Infinity Saga, we had Thanos as like the big bad of the MCU, and he presented himself as a massive threat, one that would go on to threaten the entire universe itself. I mean, if you've seen Avengers Endgame, you know that his plan ultimately was to wipe out the entire universe and just remake it in his own image using the Infinity Stones. And that in itself is a really massive threat. But when it comes to Kang, he poses not just a threat to one single universe, but to all universes in the entire multiverse. And I think that's also something that's threatening about Kang, is the fact that unlike Thanos, who was a single threat, he was a single enemy for the Avengers and for the heroes of the MCU to fight, Kang isn't just one man. Kang is made up of multiple versions of himself, all of whom have joined together to form the Council of Kangs, who, from what we can tell, seek to control and rule over the entire multiverse. But even so, why should we fear a group of Kangs over someone like Thanos, who is, again, very powerful even without the Infinity Gauntlet? One of the big reasons why I think the MCU should fear someone like Kang is due to the introduction of the version of Kang in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Now, this version of Kang the Conqueror just shows how powerful Kang really is, even just by himself. We know that in that movie, he is someone who opposed the Council of Kang, believing that their actions were causing harm to the multiverse itself. But upon attempting to destroy them, he ended up being banished to the quantum realm of Earth 616. And his time chair, his ship, was damaged so that he was unable to escape and was forced to live there in exile. Now, eventually, even though his ship was damaged, he would eventually gain access to his advanced suit of armor. And with that suit of armor, he would be able to conquer the entire quantum realm, building up a massive empire and army and seek to repair his time chair so that he can take his army and go and oppose or try and destroy the Council of Kangs once again. And I think just watching Quantumania, I know a lot of people sometimes will look at that movie and think, well, Kang's not that dangerous because he gets beat by Ant-Man in the end. But when you actually watch the movie and see just how hard it was to beat Kang in that movie, I think that just goes to show how dangerous he really is. Because yes, he does ultimately get beaten by Ant-Man and Wasp in the end, but just looking at how hard they had to fight just to defeat him and how far they had to go. I mean, we look in the movie and he spends 30 years in the quantum realm. All he has access to is his suit of armor. And with that suit, he's able to build up this massive empire, this very advanced army. And with that army, within 30 years, he's able to conquer the entire quantum realm. Like, yes, there are little bands of resistance here and there, but overall, he has control of the entire quantum realm. And any time that he is opposed by anyone in the movie, he literally flicks them away like a bug. Like, literally. Anytime the characters try to attack him or to trick him, he literally is able to outsmart them and beat them, and they barely, if ever, can land a hit on him. And even when they do manage to finally land like one or two hits, he just shrugs them off like it's nothing. The only time that he's actually able to be beaten is when he's literally overwhelmed by Hank Pym's highly intelligent and very advanced group of giant ants who are able to overwhelm him and manage to damage his suit enough that it becomes inoperable. And after that, he ends up going toe-to-toe with Ant-Man. And even without his suit of armor, being just a normal person at this point, without any advanced technology to help him, he quite literally beats Scott Lang near death. I mean, he beats him up with his bare hands, and it's only at the end when Hope joins Scott and is able to knock him back into the power source to his time chair, and he is seemingly killed, that they are able to finally beat him. But I mean, just watching the movie, you could see just how much it took to beat this one Kang. Again, he took control of the entire quantum realm, built an army, built an empire, opposed all sorts of different threats, and just was narrowly defeated. Even when the rebel army was able to overwhelm his own forces, as soon as he arrived on the battlefield, he single-handedly fought off all the rebels and caused them to literally run in fear. And when Ant-Man, Wasp, and Stature showed up to fight against Kang, he literally just shrugged them off. Like, I think, Scott was able to land a couple of hits as Giant Man, but again, Kang just shrugged it off like it was no big deal. Hank Pym showing up with what I like to call Deus Ant Machina to defeat him was pretty. I don't think Kang could have predicted that happening. I mean, the circumstances were pretty ludicrous to begin with, and it's like, it was a fun scene in the movie, but at the time, in universe, how could Kang predict a giant army of ants who are also highly intelligent and highly advanced with technology that they've managed to create in the quantum realm in a massive span of time, because they've been there longer due to the timey-wiminess of how the quantum realm works. But it took all of that to defeat Kang, and this was just one version of Kang. Whereas now we've been introduced to an entire council, which, based off of just the scene in the movie, is full of hundreds, if not thousands, of Kangs, all of whom have either equal to abilities of Kang the Conqueror in Quantumania, and possibly some who have other abilities we've yet to see. I mean, the three main Kangs that we see with the council all are very different from Kang the Conqueror in Quantumania, and very well could possess abilities and powers and technology that we've yet to see. and could even rival him. I mean, considering they were able to defeat this Kang the Conqueror and send him in exile into the quantum realm, just shows that they are very powerful. And even, with just one Kang, I mean, one Kang can conquer universes by himself. So I think it's just, I feel like some people might, write off Kang the Conqueror because he was beat by Ant-Man in Quantumania, but I think people tend to not point out the fact that what it took to take him down in that movie, imagine trying to do that with hundreds, if not thousands, of Kangs attempting to take over the multiverse. I mean, to me, that's a pretty massive threat in itself. And I think it should also be pointed out that even someone like Thanos, who physically is stronger than Kang without his suit, obviously. I mean, Kang's, main source of power is his armor. But without it, he's just a normal man. A very strong man who can, take you on in a fight, sure, but he's not, without his suit, he's not on the level of Thanos, who could take on all the Avengers literally by himself. But even in Avengers Endgame, we could see that Thanos had, he had a breaking point. We see him at one point get, attacked by Scarlet Witch, and she just narrowly defeats him. And if it weren't for him calling down his ship to fire upon the battlefield and, allow him to escape her attack, there's very high chance that he would have lost. So even someone like Thanos isn't all powerful, at least not without the Infinity Gauntlet. And so Kang, in my opinion, with his suit of armor, is just as powerful as Thanos was on his own. And so just imagining someone with that kind of power multiplied by hundreds, if not thousands, to me is a very, very formidable threat, especially when you're taking on the entire Marvel multiverse. But yeah, as I mentioned before, though, Thanos, while a massive threat during the Infinity Saga, he was still one single threat. He was a very powerful threat, sure, but he was still only one villain that the Avengers had to fight. Kang, on the other hand, poses a completely different threat in the sense that he is, again, arguably just as powerful as Thanos is with his suit. And given that there's an entire council of Kangs out there plotting to take over the multiverse, I think it should be considered that he poses a much greater threat to the MCU than Thanos ever could. I mean, essentially, the Kangs, the Kang Council, the Council of Kangs, is made up of an entire army of Thanos-level threats. And to me, that feels like a pretty significant threat to the MCU, one that could possibly be the greatest threat that the MCU has ever faced. But until we see more of Kang and see where exactly his story is going, only time will tell as to how big of a threat he will pose. But as of what we've learned so far from both He Who Remains and what we've seen of Kang in Quantumania and the threat that the Council of Kang poses, I think it's something that the heroes of the MCU should be very concerned about, and something that I'm very curious to see how they handle going forward. But until then, though, if you have any thoughts about this video, if you have any comments, whether you agree, disagree, or you had some thoughts you wanted to add to it, please feel welcome to drop those in the comments below. But until then, y'all have a good day, and I will see y'all in the next video.